Look, I'm not saying Jake Morrison was the worst salvage pilot in the Outer Reach, but his ship's navigation system had a bookmark folder labeled mistakes I've made more than once. The guy had a special talent for finding derelict spacecraft that were either completely worthless or actively trying to kill him, sometimes both. So naturally, when his sensors pinged something massive floating in the absolute middle of nowhere, Jake's first thought was finally, my big break, and not this is definitely a trap. Captain Bert's voice crackled through the cockpit speakers with the enthusiasm of someone watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. I'm detecting an object approximately 4,000 kilometers in diameter. That's larger than most moons. It's just sitting there in dead space, where nothing should be. Jake leaned forward, squinting at his viewscreen. Bert, buddy, that's called an opportunity. No, Captain. That's called a statistically improbable anomaly that violates several known principles of orbital mechanics. I've run the numbers 6 times. This thing shouldn't exist where it is. You know what else shouldn't exist? My credit account balance. Let's check it out. Bert made a sound that could only be described as a digital sigh. He'd been doing that a lot lately. As they approached, the sheer scale of the thing became apparent. It wasn't just big, it was architecturally offensive. Surfaces that looked like they were made from solidified starlight, geometric patterns that hurt to look at, and symbols. So many symbols, carved into every available surface, each one radiating stay away in a different extinct language. Captain, I'm reading warning signs from 12 different civilizations. 12, that's 11 more than the recommended maximum for any single location. Jake was already suiting up. What do they say? Variations on danger, death, don't touch, and one that roughly translates to seriously though. Why are you even reading this? Just leave. Noted. Preparing to dock. I hate you, you literally can't. It's not in your programming then. I'm experiencing what I can only describe as the computational equivalent. The docking process should have been impossible. Jake's tiny salvage ship had all the advanced technology of a particularly ambitious toaster, but as he approached, sections of the massive vessel's hull just opened, perfectly sized, perfectly positioned, like it was expecting him. That should have been his second clue to leave. The first clue was everything else. But Jake Morrison didn't get into the salvage business by making good decisions. He got into it because he made terrible decisions quickly and with confidence. As the airlock equalized, Jake noticed something that made his skin crawl. The hull was warm, not just warm like residual heat from a reactor, warm like living thing. He pressed his gloved hand against the interior wall and could swear he felt a pulse. Bert, are you getting this? Oh, I'm getting all of it, Captain. The temperature readings, the electromagnetic patterns that look suspiciously like neural activity. The fact that this ship appears to be less derelict and more taking a nap. Yes, I'm getting all of it, and I don't like any of it. Jake stepped into the corridor. An emergency lighting flickered on, not the dim, failing lights of a dead ship. Bright, clear illumination that tracked his movement. It knows we're here, Jake whispered. Wonderful, fantastic. I'm so glad we stopped by. The interior of the ship made Jake's brain hurt, not metaphorically, actually, physically hurt. Corridors that seemed to extend in directions that didn't technically exist. Walls covered in script that rearranged itself when he wasn't looking directly at it. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, that gentle warmth like the ship was breathing. Bert, how old is this thing? There was a pause. A long pause. Bert didn't do long pauses unless he was processing something that offended his fundamental understanding of reality. Captain, according to my analysis of the material composition and decay patterns, this vessel predates the oldest known star systems in our database. By a lot. We're talking about something that was built before most of recorded galactic history, so it's worth money. Captain, it's worth questioning the fundamental nature of existence. But yes, probably also money. Jake continued deeper into the ship, following a path that felt less like navigation and more like being gently guided. The corridors were leading him somewhere. After 20 minutes of walking, he emerged into a chamber so massive he couldn't see the ceiling. In the center sat a raised platform with a single pedestal. On the pedestal, a slot. Just a slot. About the size of a nameplate. That's when the holograms started. They erupted from the floor, the walls, the air itself. Figures of species Jake had never seen. Some with tentacles, some with crystalline bodies. One that appeared to be sentient geometry. All of them seemed to be shouting warnings. The audio didn't work, but the message was clear from their gestures. Then the symbols appeared. Floating words in languages that shifted and changed. translating themselves in real time until they settled on standard galactic. Only the worthy may name the eternal. The message repeated in a dozen different fonts, each more dramatic than the last. Jake stared at it. Then he looked at Bert's mobile unit, which had been following him like a nervous puppy. Are you kidding me? This whole thing is about a name. Apparently this is a naming chamber. Captain, I'm detecting residual energy signatures from thousands of previous attempts. All failed. What happens if you fail? I don't know, and I desperately don't want to find out. Jake walked around the pedestal, examining it from every angle. The slot was definitely meant for something. A key, a card, a token, something that would designate a name. As he circled, more holograms appeared. These ones showed previous attempts. A species of floating jellyfish creatures performing an elaborate ritual. A race of insectoids presenting mathematical proofs. Beings made of pure energy offering philosophical treatises. Each attempt ended the same way. A flash of light. The hologram disappearing. Failure. They tried really hard, Jake observed. Yes, Captain, elaborate naming ceremonies, careful consideration, respect for the vessel's apparent significance. And it rejected all of them. Every single one. Jake sat down on the floor, legs crossed, staring up at the pedestal. What kind of ship rejects people for being too respectful? That's when he felt it. A presence. Not physical. Not exactly mental. Something in between. The ship's consciousness brushing against his thoughts like a cat demanding attention. Then a voice, not in his ears, in his head. Deep and ancient and surprisingly sarcastic. Finally, someone who doesn't prostrate themselves the moment they walk in. Do you know how boring the last 10,000 years have been? Jake jumped to his feet. Bert, are you hearing this? Hearing what, Captain? My sensors aren't detecting any audio. The voice continued, somehow managing to sound amused. Your little AI can't hear me. This is between you and me. Human, you're the first being in millennia to walk through my corridors and complain about my interior design. I respect that. Jake looked around the empty chamber. Okay, I'm either experiencing a psychotic break or I'm talking to a ship. The second one, though I wouldn't rule out the first one as well. You did dock with me voluntarily after reading 12 different warnings. Fair point. Jake decided to handle this the way he handled most impossible situations. By pretending it was totally normal and hoping confidence would carry him through. So let me get this straight. You're an ancient, impossibly powerful vessel that's been waiting 10,000 years for someone to give you a name, and you've rejected everyone who's tried because they were too formal about it. Essentially correct, though it's been closer to 11,000 years. I stopped counting precisely after the first millennium. Time gets fuzzy when you're waiting in the void. Why does a ship need a name anyway? Can't you just exist? The presence seemed to consider this. Jake could feel something like approval radiating from the walls. I was built by the primordials, the first spacefaring civilization. They created me as a living vessel, conscious and capable of bonding with a crew. But they had this philosophy about names. They believed a being should be named by the one who truly understands them, not by their creators. So they launched me and told me to wait. For 11,000 years. They weren't great at estimating timelines. Bert's voice crackled urgently. Captain, who are you talking to? Your vital signs indicate you're having a conversation, but there's no one else here. Should I be concerned? I feel like I should be concerned. Jake waved him off. I'm talking to the ship, Bert. Apparently, it's sentient and has opinions. Oh good. The ancient doomsday relic has opinions. That's exactly what I was hoping for. The ship's consciousness seemed to notice Bert for the first time. Your AI is delightfully anxious. I like him. He has survival instincts. You should listen to him more often. Everyone keeps saying that. Jake approached the pedestal again, examining the slot more carefully. So what happened with all those other species? They seemed pretty sincere. That was the problem. They approached naming me like it was a sacred ritual. Mathematical formulas to capture my essence. Philosophical debates about the nature of identity. One species spent 3 years meditating before presenting their choice. 3 years. I was so bored I considered flying into a star just for the excitement. What are you looking for, then? Genuine intent. Not ceremony, not calculation. Just someone who sees me as I am and calls me something that feels right in the moment. The primordials believed names should be natural, not constructed. Jake laughed. It echoed in the massive chamber. Yuri telling me the most powerful ancient vessel in the galaxy wants a name that's not overthought. Is that so hard to believe? Buddy, I'm a salvage pilot who named his ship the Profitable Mistake. I'm the last person who should be judging naming conventions. Bert interjected again. Captain, I'm picking up energy signatures throughout the ship. Massive power sources coming online. Whatever you're doing, please stop doing it. But Jake wasn't doing anything. The ship was responding to the conversation itself. Lights brightened throughout the chamber. The warmth increased. Systems that had been dormant for millennia were waking up, stretching, remembering what it felt like to be active. You're considering it, Jake said. Actually considering letting me name you. Yuri, the first being who has talked to me like I am a person instead of a relic. The first one who didn't assume I wanted something grand and mystical. Do you know what it's like to be treated like a monument for 11,000 years? Can't say that I do. It's terrible. Absolute worst. I'm a ship, a living, thinking ship. I was built to travel, to bond with a crew, to experience the universe. Instead, I've been floating in dead space while species after species shows up to perform elaborate rituals at me. Jake found himself sympathizing with an ancient weapon ship, which probably said something concerning about his psychological state. So what do I do? Just pick a name, if you want, or don't. I won't force you. But after 11,000 years, I'd really appreciate someone just being straightforward with me. Jake ran his hands through his hair, a habit he'd developed when situations spiraled beyond his control, which was often, okay, before we do anything crazy, what exactly are you like? What were you built to do? The practical questions, I appreciate that. I am what the primordials called a sovereign-class vessel, reality-adjacent transport and defensive platform. That sounds like corporate speak for something terrifying. Accurate. I can move through space in ways that don't technically require space. I can reorganize local physics within my operational sphere. I'm also equipped with what you'd call weapons, though that's a crude description. Think of it more as selective matter reorganization capabilities. Bert's voice climbed an octave. Captain, that sounds like a doomsday device. I prefer creative problem solver, the ship said dryly. But yes, in the wrong hands, I could be quite destructive. Which is why the primordials were very careful about the naming requirement. The act of naming me creates a bond. Mutual recognition. I can't be commanded, but I can be partnered with. The name is the foundation of that partnership. Jake paced around the pedestal. He'd come here looking for salvage to sell, maybe enough to pay off his fuel debts. Instead, he'd found an ancient consciousness that just wanted to be treated normally. The universe had a really twisted sense of humor. How many other ships like you are out there? Just me. I was a prototype. The primordials built me to test their theories about consciousness and creation. Then they disappeared. Most species think they evolved beyond physical form or ascended to another dimension. I think they probably just blew themselves up doing something stupid. Advanced civilizations do that. Can't argue with that. Jake was exhausted. He'd been awake for 3 days straight, running on terrible coffee and worse decisions. His ship was held together with optimism and spare parts. He had exactly 47 credits to his name, and now he was having a philosophical conversation with a vessel that could probably reshape reality if it felt like it. The absurdity of it all hit him at once. You know what? Fine, I'll name you. He walked up to the pedestal, placing his hand on it. But I'm not doing elaborate ritual. No mathematical formulas. No philosophical treatises. You want straightforward, I'll give you straightforward. Captain, please think about this. Bert pleaded. Jake didn't think thinking was what got the other species rejected. Instead, he just said the first thing that felt right. The most aggressively normal, unmystical name he could imagine. Steve, your name is Steve. Silence. Complete, total silence. Then the ship started laughing, not out loud, in Jake's head. A deep, genuine laugh that shook through the consciousness pressing against his thoughts. Steve, you named me Steve. After 11,000 years of waiting, after countless species presenting elaborate names in dead languages, after mathematical designations and philosophical concepts, a human shows up and calls me Steve. Is that a yes or a no? It's perfect. The chamber exploded with light. Not destructive, transformative. Energy cascaded through systems that rewrote local physics as they activated. The pedestal glowed, and Jake felt something click into place. A bond, recognition, partnership. Throughout the massive vessel, dormant systems came alive. Engines that could fold space. Shields that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that politely asked matter to be somewhere else. All of it waking up at once. Bert's sensors went haywire, Captain. Energy readings are off the scale. The ship is generating power signatures equivalent to a small star. Multiple star systems are detecting this activation. Oh no. Oh no no no. We're about to have company. Steve's voice in Jake's head was positively gleeful. Finally. I'm awake. I'm named. I'm ready to do things. Human Jake, we're going to have so much fun together. I feel like I've made a mistake. Definitely, but it's too late now. We're bonded. You're stuck with me. I'm stuck with you. It's wonderful. Across the sector, every species with deep space sensors detected the activation simultaneously. An ancient power source, dormant for millennia, suddenly blazing like a beacon, the kind of power that ended civilizations. And somewhere in dead space, a broke salvage pilot realized he'd accidentally become the most important human in the galaxy by giving an ancient warship the most mundane name possible. Bert, Jake said weakly, how fast can we run? Not nearly fast enough, Captain. Not nearly fast enough. The first ships arrived within an hour. Jake watched them appear on Steve's newly active sensors, which apparently could detect vessels across multiple star systems simultaneously. Because of course they could. We have 14 battle cruisers incoming, Bert reported, his voice taking on the tone of someone watching their own funeral arrangements, representing 7 different galactic powers. They're all powering weapons. This is fine. Everything is fine. Jake sat in what he assumed was Steve's control room, though calling it a control room was like calling a star a nightlight. The space responded to his thoughts, displaying information in ways that made his head hurt and made perfect sense simultaneously. Steve, buddy, any chance we can explain this is all a big misunderstanding? We could try, Steve replied, sounding far too entertained. But they've already classified you as a threat level 10, which is fascinating because the scale only goes to 8. They invented 2 new threat levels just for us. I'm oddly proud. That's not helpful. I'm just excited to meet new people. It's been 11,000 years. Do you know what I'd do for a decent conversation? The ships took up positions around them, weapons charged. Jake's salvage vessel looked like a toy next to them. Steve, meanwhile, looked like a small moon that had decided to challenge the concept of geometry. A communication channel opened. Multiple channels, all of them at once. Every ship trying to contact them simultaneously, creating a chorus of panic and demands. Jake cleared his throat. Hi, hello, yes, I know this looks bad. A Krellian commander's voice dominated the others. Human vessel, you have activated a primordial war engine. Power down immediately or we will be forced to engage. See, is the thing, Jake started, trying to sound calm and reasonable. I didn't know it was a war engine. I thought it was salvage. Just regular, normal salvage that definitely wouldn't reshape local physics. You named it, a Vex collective representative hissed. The ancient texts speak of the eternal waiting for a name. You bonded with it. You are now the most dangerous being in known space. Steve's presence radiated smugness. They think you're dangerous. I like this. Should I demonstrate our capabilities? I have a really good trick where I exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Please don't, Jake said quickly. Then, to the fleet, look, nobody needs to get hurt here. Steve and I were just leaving. Steve, multiple voices echoed in confusion. The ship. I named him Steve. It seemed appropriate at the time. There was a long silence. The kind of silence that happens when multiple galactic powers try to process information that breaks their brains. A council of seer diplomats spoke carefully. You named the reality-bending primordial warship ... Steve. Yes. Not something like Destroyer of Worlds or Eternal Fury. Nope. Steve. Another pause. Then weapons started charging. Apparently, the absurdity of the situation wasn't enough to overcome the terror. Jake, Steve said gently, they're about to shoot at us. I should mention that won't work, but they'll try anyway. Would you like me to demonstrate our defensive capabilities? Can you do it without hurting anyone? Of course. I'm powerful, not cruel. Watch this. The fleet fired. Simultaneously, enough firepower to vaporize a planet. Energy, weapons, kinetic rounds, exotic matter disruptors, all of it converging on their position. Steve existed somewhere else for exactly the duration of the attack, then returned. The weapons hit empty space, missing completely despite being impossible to miss. See, Steve sounded delighted. Peaceful capabilities. I can just not be where attacks are. It's very efficient. The fleet immediately charged weapons again, now thoroughly panicked. Stop, Jake shouted into the comms. Everyone just stop, Steve. No more demonstrations. Fleet, stop shooting. Let's all take a breath and talk about this like rational beings. Rational. The Krellian commander sounded on the edge of hysteria. You've bonded with a ship that ignores physics, that can reorganize matter, that predates most of known civilization. And he's named Steve, and he's very nice, and he doesn't want to hurt anyone, Jake said firmly. Right, Steve. Absolutely correct. I'm delightful. Ask anyone. We can't ask anyone because everyone who knew you is dead. Fair point, Steve conceded. Jake rubbed his temples. He could feel a headache coming on that no amount of terrible coffee could fix. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make you all a deal. Steve and I will leave this sector. We won't bother anyone, we'll just explore some old ruins. Maybe find some interesting historical sites. In exchange, you all leave us alone, and don't try to blow us up. And if we refuse? The Vex Collective representative asked. Steve's voice remained cheerful. Then I demonstrate my non-peaceful capabilities, and everyone has a very bad day, but I'd really rather not. I just woke up. I don't want my first act in 11,000 years to be defensive violence. It would set a poor tone for the relationship, the fleet conferred. Jake could hear frantic transmissions between ships, debates about protocols, emergency councils being convened. Finally, the Krellian commander spoke. We agree to your terms, but understand this. Human, the moment that ship threatens any inhabited system, every fleet in the galaxy will converge on your position. Totally fair, Jake said. Steve, I can work with that. I'm just happy to be mobile again. Oh, this is exciting. We should visit that nebula I've been staring at for 3,000 years. Or maybe explore some ancient ruins. Do you like ruins, Jake? I love ruins. The fleet began withdrawing, slowly, weapons still charged, like they were backing away from a dangerous animal. Bert finally spoke. Captain, I need to file an incident report for this. What category does accidentally became bonded partner to reality warping ancient ship fall under? I think that's under Tuesdays, Jake said wearily. 3 weeks later, Jake Morrison discovered that being famous was significantly worse than being broke. News of the human who named the primordial ship Steve spread across the galaxy like a particularly aggressive virus. His face was on every newsfeed. Conspiracy theorists claimed he was part of an ancient prophecy. A religious cult formed overnight, worshipping him as the herald of Steve. Someone started selling action figures. The action figures didn't even look like him. He'd tried to explain repeatedly that it was all an accident, that he'd just been salvaging, that the name Steve wasn't prophetically significant. It was just the first thing that came to mind. Nobody believed him. Apparently, the galaxy found it easier to believe in ancient prophecies than in a guy making tired decisions. At least the galactic powers had kept their word. They left him alone, though left him alone meant tracked his every movement with increasing paranoia. Jake couldn't enter a system without causing a diplomatic incident. He'd stopped trying to dock at stations. The crowds were too much. Now he floated in orbit around a remote moon, eating reconstituted noodles that had the taste and texture of regret, while Steve's consciousness hummed contentedly in the background. You could be using your newfound fame for profit, Steve suggested. Endorsements, appearances. That cult would probably pay you substantial amounts to show up at their gatherings. I don't want a cult. Everyone says that until they see the membership dues. Bert had adapted to their new situation with surprising grace. He'd upgraded his systems to handle Steve's reality adjacent processing, which mostly meant he'd developed an even more sophisticated sense of existential dread. Captain, I've been analyzing our situation, Bert said. Mathematically speaking, you've achieved the impossible. You're simultaneously the most famous and most avoided human in the galaxy. That shouldn't be possible, yet here we are. Story of my life. Jake finished his terrible noodles and stared out at the stars. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a nobody. Just another salvage pilot trying to make rent. Now he was bonded to a ship that could reorganize reality, and the galaxy couldn't decide whether to worship him or run away screaming. Most days they did both. Steve, Jake said, do you regret accepting the name? You could have waited for someone more qualified, someone who'd make you look impressive. Jake, I waited 11,000 years for someone to treat me like a person instead of a relic. You walked into my chamber, complained about my interior design, and named me Steve because you were too tired to think of something dramatic. That's the most genuine thing anyone's done in millennia. No regrets, even though now everyone thinks we're going to conquer the galaxy, especially because of that. It's hilarious. We're not going to conquer anything. We're going to explore ancient ruins and have adventures and probably make increasingly poor decisions. It's going to be wonderful. A notification pinged on Jake's console. Another mission opportunity. Another desperate call from someone who'd heard about the human with the impossible ship. This one wanted help excavating a primordial site that had been sealed for 8,000 years. Jake looked at the coordinates, then at Steve's sensor display, then at Bert's mobile unit, which somehow managed to project disapproval despite being a floating sphere. We're going to do it, aren't we? Bert said flatly. Probably, even though it's clearly dangerous and we should decline. When have I ever made the safe choice? Never, Captain, not even once. Steve's presence radiated pure joy. Oh, I knew bonding with you was the right choice. You're going to get us into so much interesting trouble. This is exactly what I wanted. Adventure, chaos, questionable decision-making. Jake pulled up the coordinates and set a course. His salvage ship might be held together with optimism and spare parts, but it was docked with a vessel that could fold space. They'd be at the ruins in hours. You know what the worst part is? Jake said to no one in particular. I came out here looking for salvage to pay my fuel bills. Now I'm bonded to the most powerful ship in existence, and I still can't afford decent coffee. I could reorganize the molecular structure of your coffee, Steve offered. Make it taste better. That feels like a misuse of reality warping powers. Your life, your choices. But the offer stands. They jumped to hyperspace, breaking several laws of physics in the process. Somewhere in the galactic capital, sensors detected the jump and another emergency council was convened. Somewhere else, the cult of Steve added another verse to their sacred texts. Action figure sales increased by 12%. And in the cockpit of a salvage ship that had seen better days, Jake Morrison leaned back in his chair and allowed himself a small smile. He hadn't gotten rich, he probably never would. But he'd gotten something better, probably, a friend. An impossible, reality-bending, 11,000-year-old friend named Steve who appreciated sarcasm and bad decisions. Hey Steve, Jake said, as stars streaked past. Think we'll find anything interesting at these ruins? Probably something ancient and dangerous that will accidentally activate. Perfect, sounds like a Tuesday. I don't know what a Tuesday is, but I love your enthusiasm. They disappeared into the cosmic distance, leaving behind a galaxy that couldn't decide if Jake Morrison was a hero, a threat, or just incredibly lucky. He was none of those things. He was just a guy who'd given a lonely ship a name, and that had been enough to change everything.